Good evening, everyone. I see there are still some people coming in, but I think we have a lot to get to tonight, so we'll get started and take care of some housekeeping before we get into the meat of the meeting. So before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that live transcript is available through Zoom. If you would like to use it, it's similar to closed captioning. If you would like to use it, go to the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on live transcripts. And you can either hide the subtitles, show the subtitles, or view the full transcript. So I will call the order of the Hingham School Committee to order at 7 p.m. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify me at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that I may inform all other participants of said recording. Harbor Media will be recording tonight. If anyone else is planning to record, could you just unmute yourself and let me know? Okay, seeing none, we are on to item 3, which is questions and comments. The Hingham School Committee encourages community engagement and welcomes questions and comments as agenda items are discussed at the meeting. In addition, we have set aside up to 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting for comments or questions that fall under the purview of the school committee and are not already on tonight's agenda. If any guests wish to speak, please raise your hand, state your name and address, and address your comments to the chairperson. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker and must relate to topics within the scope of responsibility of the school committee. As established by Mass General Laws, the responsibilities of the school committee are to 1, select and evaluate the superintendent, 2, review and approve budgets for public education in the district, and 3, establish educational goals and policies for the schools in the district. Speakers are encouraged to present their remarks in a respectful manner and to consider the privacy interests of others. The public comment period is not a time for debate or response to comments by the school committee. The school committee is not adopting or endorsing any of the comments made during the public comment period. So you can probably guess our attorneys drafted that for us. Mainly it's to let everyone know that school committee meetings are meetings in public, not discussions with the public. And we're subject to open meeting laws, which requires all of our meetings to be posted with specific agendas. And we're required to stick to those agenda items. Our committee wants to hear from the public, which is why we have this comment period. And we usually allow comment on each agenda item as we go. This time is an opportunity to speak to any concerns that are not already on the agenda, but because they're not on the posted agenda, we can't answer or discuss these comments. We can, however, consider these topics for a future meeting. So with all that being said, if you have a question or comment about something not already on the agenda, please raise your hand and we'll either ask you to unmute yourself or we'll just unmute you for you, depending on your Zoom settings. And again, we have 15 minutes for this tonight. So the first hand I see up is Matt Cosman. Julie, could you unmute Matt?
You were off for a second there, Matt. Give us a second. I think you're off.
Matt Cosman, 12 Summit Drive. I sent much of this content in an email on Friday, and I appreciate many of your responses. In addition, thank you for the time that you've invested in trying to work through this difficult situation, and in particular with the increased outreach and opportunity to connect with parents. At the start of the school year, I think you were all in a very difficult situation of trying to create a plan without a lot of data information, with a lot of parents and teachers with conflicting views on in-school versus remote. I personally had faith that our conservative in-person plan would allow for both safety for admin, teachers, and children, as well as a path to reopen safely as more information became available. I recognize the school committee and HEA created an agreement in December that would allow for more in-person learning for our youngest children, though I do think the lack of specificity for middle and high school was concerning. Because the plan for kindergarten did not include a stipulation of getting to green, it was able to be executed, which is a positive. Unfortunately, that is 1/13 of the school's population getting a substantial increase. This left the vast majority with no real hope of increased live learning based on the math behind moving from red to green as a town. At At the same time, we now have enough information to understand the risks of COVID spread in school in Hingham, in surrounding towns, in the country, and in other countries. We should have enough confidence that with the proper precautions that we already have in place, we can have the children in person in a much more significant way, while still maintaining the appropriate safety for all involved. This pandemic is not going away in the next month or year, and while vaccines, better testing, and herd immunity will help, it will not completely eliminate the risk of our teachers and children getting infected with COVID-19. The staggering difference in our town's plan versus other towns' actions in terms of getting more in-person learning is alarming, both for the next several months, but also as we look ahead to the fall. The time is now to use the hard work conducted and translate it into action and change our MOA immediately. We need to remove the green language and get the elementary back in school 5 days a week. We need to have a specific plan that will allow for the middle and high school to get back shortly thereafter 5 days a week. Then we need to get to work on figuring out how to implement lunch in the schools and have an agreement in place where we offer full-time school to all of our grades in the fall. My 3 children are in elementary school, and I have now watched for 5 months their attention and willingness to engage decline significantly. The risks to academic achievement and social and emotional well-being are real, significant, and concerning for all children. At the start of this, the risk of COVID infection was not understood, and it was the right answer to shut schools down in March of last year. In February of this year, the risk of COVID is largely understood, and we are choosing to penalize students' social and emotional well-being and academic progress, and the calculus needs to be changed. I'll close by saying that my wife and I are graduates of Hingham High School and moved back to town in 2007 with the expectation that our 3 children would graduate as well. We are now actively debating if we can trust this town's school system to meet their needs. Our children have an incredible group of friends that make us hesitant to consider pulling them into private school or moving to a surrounding town. But we talk every single day and night about whether we are failing as parents by keeping them in the system. I plead with the school committee, Dr. Austin, and the HEA to please make the right decision for our children and get them in school immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next up, we have Michael Salerno. I don't know if he put his hand down. I don't see him anymore. Lauren Byrne. Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw Michael's hand come up again. We can unmute Michael.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. So I just have a follow-up from a few weeks ago. I was on here and just tried to have a little bit of a discussion. So I just want to follow up and say we do need a concise, transparent plan. This plan needs to detail the actual plan in its entirety and specific outcomes. The community should be entitled to that and what we're trying to achieve overall. We've come on here week after week and talked about bits of plans and where we can receive that information and that it was easy to get that information. I did go on the website. I think the chair mentioned that the website was a great place for detail. It isn't. I'm sorry to say, it's not easy to navigate around. And honestly, it's not a user-friendly website that's giving us true insight into what we are trying to achieve as a community. I honestly don't understand when I go on there what we are trying to achieve. I'm hoping that the school committee will take me a little bit serious tonight and hold the administration accountable to a detailed plan and some outcomes, which I feel Dr. Austin and his administration has neglected to do. Thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next, we have Lauren Byrne. We're going to unmute Lauren.
Unmuted. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I asked this a couple weeks ago. I sent it in an email and haven't heard back yet. So my question is, I'd like to know at what point do we make a decision that the kids aren't going to go back to school this year? Because it's February 8th. We're going to be heading out onto school vacation. So it's another short month. The kids come back March. You know, my kids ask every day. I obviously want the kids back in school tomorrow, but, you know, we didn't find out when the kids were going back to school or what the plan was until days before in August. So at what point do you guys just say, we're done focusing on this year, we're going to go back to the drawing boards and focus on getting kids back in fall? Because like most people on this call, I am confident in our ability to get the kids back in the fall, but I'd like to know what the plan is for this year. At what point do you guys say it's not possible and just stop stringing us along?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I will say this isn't a question and answer period, but definitely stay on. Dr. Austin will be giving an update on that tonight. Next is Eileen Bevins.
Hi everyone, Eileen Bevins, 8 Plymouth River Road. My comment goes along with the other comment about the detailed plan. And I'm hoping that the detailed plan for getting back to school includes a staffing plan. I understand that it's really difficult to find subs and paras, but I haven't seen a plan for how HR or whoever is doing that is going to get that done. And I do think it can be done, and I hope that there is a plan done and available for people to see.
Okay, thank you, Eileen. Next, David Del Sesto.
Hi, good evening, everyone. David Del Sesto, 29 Rice Road. I'm an infectious diseases and internal medicine physician in the area in Boston. So I'd quickly like to thank the school committee, superintendent, parents, and of course the teachers who are going to school and showing a degree of courage in doing so. I think that needs to be recognized. However, with the talks of this opening, reopening, expanded reopening, there are definitely fears. I'm personally sensitive to those. I find the best way of approaching those fears are with facts and data, which is effective, especially in this neck of the woods, where we revere science. So I'd like just to briefly run through 3 of the latest studies from the medical infectious disease world. I apologize for the brevity. I don't want to get into the weeds, but I just want to basically state the state they're from in the journal that they're published in. So first is a Mississippi study that was published in MMWR, Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, which is a CDC publication and endorsed by the CDC. And in this case, it was a case-controlled study. So they tried to kind of pit against people who had coronavirus versus people who did not acquire coronavirus, and if they tested positive in school. So in this study, they found that attending school 14 days prior to testing positive for coronavirus was not a risk factor. However, at-home gatherings, visitors coming into your home from outside your home were the 2 major risk factors for being coronavirus positive in that study. The next study is a much larger study. This was published in Pediatrics in 2021. I'll call this the North Carolina study, where they had close to 100,000 students, so it was 90,000 students across 11 school districts. And this was 9 weeks of school, so this was basically a fall semester. And during this period, they found that in-school transmission was rare. It wasn't completely negative. It was 32 infections found in school versus 733 acquired infections in the community that are associated with community acquisition. There was no student-to-staff transmission during this study also. And that was done by contact tracing, how they determined, which is still thought to be the gold standard of how to find out where these students acquired coronavirus. The last study, the one that's gotten the most press recently, is a Wisconsin study. Close to 5,000 students, close to 700 staff, 13 weeks, and this was published in, again, MMWR, 2021, just January 29th, or about a week ago. And during this study, it was found that the incidence in school was lower in the community. What's interesting about this study is that the test positivity rate in the community was up to 40% in this study. So almost 1 out of 2 people at the height in Wisconsin were testing positive for coronavirus. However, it was out of the 4,876 students, only 7 were thought to have acquired coronavirus with in-school transmission, and 0 out of 654 were thought to be 0 out of 654 staff-acquired coronavirus. My time out?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those. There are 2 more hands, Dave Bello and Julie Donovan. I'm going to take both of those, and then we'll end the public comment period. Okay, so Dave, you are next.
Thank you. I'd start by certainly complimenting Matt's opening remarks as well as the good doctor. I certainly agree. I wanted to add the notion of speed and pace to the conversation. The then there was a new plan in October that was recently implemented as well. The plans, though, are moving much slower than the virus and the needs of the students. And as we move forward, we need to be able to increase the pace at which we're moving and the pace at which we're adjusting. And if we're in a position where we can make 2 changes during the year, I think we're going to set ourselves up for inflexibility and missed opportunity. And so, whatever the mechanisms that are needed, I would argue or I'd ask that we continue to think about how we can move things quicker, iterate faster, knowing that we will not get things perfect, will not get things absolutely right. And the way to address that is to be able to move quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And finally, we have Julie Donovan.
Great, thanks, Gary. Julie Donovan, 6 Blue Sky Drive. One comment and then a quick question in the time I have. I just want to make sure everyone's aware. I have a high school student, so I'll just comment on my own experience in high school, that I feel really sad that a lot of the high school kids have essentially sort of given up. That many of the classrooms now are almost empty. 1 or 2 kids show up, and it's almost like they're sort of embarrassed to be there. The teacher they're professionals. God, we love these teachers. They're doing the best they can. And they often just have to tell the students, hey, do you mind logging into Zoom so that you're part of the class? Because you can't teach to 1 student. It's way too awkward. The kids, the high school students, have given up. And that makes me incredibly sad. So there's not a question. It's an observation. I don't think everybody at the high school is aware of that. I do have a question, though. I know there's a meeting this week with the union, and I am not a union lobbyist, but applying common sense in the term unprecedented times, this is a crisis. Why can we not stay in the room and hash this out? I know we're business professionals. We have calendars and busy lives and families. This is a crisis. I think if we meet and then decide to meet again in 2 weeks and meet again in 2 weeks, we're wasting precious time. I know collectively everyone on this call has the same goal. I know that. There's an impasse with the union that I'm not aware what it is, but if we could make the commitment to stay in that room face to face as professionals, some people his job is to hash this out. They are getting paid to make this decision, and the decision is not being made. And I beg you, if you're in that room with the teachers union, stay in that room for 24, 48 hours. We will bring you food. We will say prayers outside the door. Please hash this out and get our students back to school. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Julie. And as I noted earlier, we will be updating people on negotiations and the plan later tonight. Okay, number 4 is communications. 4.1 is student communications. Carly Kennedy can't make it tonight. So we are doing 4.2, which is communications received by the superintendent. Dr. Aspen, do you have anything?
I really don't. I'll save my remarks for my other commentaries.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I just wanted to let people know that the school committee office hours that we've been holding are canceled for tomorrow night because we are attending a meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee. Parents are welcome to attend that, but that will be about a budget update for fiscal year 21 and 22. Next one is 5, public hearing on the fiscal year 2022 operating budget. So I just wanted to pull this up and talk about this. I'm going to call the budget hearing to order at 7:19 p.m. And because we recognize that there's a great deal of interest in the school department budget and budget process this year, I'm going to just take a minute to go over the purpose of the hearing and where we are in the process. The committee has a legal responsibility to oversee and allocate the school budget. It's our job to assess and prioritize the needs of the district, to bring our recommendations to the town, and to advocate for the needs of the department and our students. The budget process starts in the late fall as the principals and senior leadership assess their needs and make recommendations for next year's budget. In late December, early January, those recommendations come to the school committee, at which point we dig into those and discuss the priorities of the department. In addition to our regular meetings, the committee meets weekly in January for workshops specifically about the budget. Now, our schools obviously don't exist in a vacuum. We're part of the whole town, and our budget is around 60% of the total town budget. So as we were discussing the needs of the school department, We're also meeting with the Advisory Committee, the Education Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee, and the Board of Selectmen to advocate for our budget and our students. In the near future, we will meet with the Board of Selectmen and Advisory Committee to present this year's budget recommendations and to hear feedback. Ultimately, they will vote to recommend a specific amount of money to town meeting, which is usually held in April but may be pushed back this year. At that point, it's up to the town, which is all of us, all residents of Hingham, to determine whether or not they agree with the recommendation and to vote on it. At that point, once the town decides on the amount of money that will be allocated to the school department, it is the responsibility of the school committee and administration to allocate those funds to maximize student services and benefits. As I noted above, the school committee has discussed the current budget recommendations extensively and will continue to do so. Massachusetts law requires each committee to hold a public hearing on the budget, this is what we're doing tonight. A budget's a policy statement, so this is your opportunity to weigh in on what you think the priorities should be for Hingham Public Schools. Our goal tonight is to listen, so we may or may not have responses to comments or questions, but we'll consider all of them, and they will help drive our discussions going forward. I'll also note that we've met with the Education Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee, but have not yet presented the budget to the Board of Selectmen and the full AdCom. Public participation is welcome at those meetings as well, so those meetings are opportunities to voice opinions and ask questions relating to how the school budget fits into the whole town budget. So with all that being said, the way we'll do this tonight is Dr. Austin will present his current recommended budget. Once the presentation is complete, if you have a comment, please raise your hand, and depending on your Zoom settings, we'll either unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself. So Dr. Austin, would you like to? You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize I could unmute myself. I was waiting for Julie to do that. I apologize, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the budget. We've been meeting weekly with the school committee and going over the budget on a weekly basis and getting input. Many attended that. So what I'm going to do tonight, we'll do a brief PowerPoint presentation, quite brief, maybe 15 slides in total, with kind of a 30,000 foot view of the budget, drilling down into the exact parts of the budget that are increased, and then I'll have Dr. John Ferris joining the end of it to discuss some of the charts, the backup information we have. And so with that, I would say, Julie, could you please load up the PowerPoint, please? Thank you. So as we just said, we're going to provide a little budget update tonight of the administration's proposed budget. This is a budget hearing. We're going to get comments from the public, and then at the end, they'll close the budget hearing and resume the regular school committee. And as many said, we have lots of things to do in there and an update. So the first thing I want to do is just want to remind everybody what the guiding principles. These are the things that when the school committee met in the fall, that they decided were our priorities with the administration. One, that we provide for expanded Hingham tiered system support services that would be necessary to remediate the loss of the academic progress resulting from COVID-19. Obviously, at this point, we've been out of school for full-time for 11 months, and that has a great price. And so we need to be prepared to, with our budget, to make sure we can remediate and to catch our students up. And so we'll be doing that with this budget. We need to fund the process of development of a 5-year Hingham Public Schools strategic plan. We need to provide staffing and support for special education that ensures that the district is able to appropriately and adequately address the needs of all students, staff, and the community. We need to fund resources required for year 1 of the district's equity and inclusion plan. And finally, we need to provide for needed personnel for central office, which includes the addition of a payroll clerk, administrative assistant, perform data analytics, and provide school committee social media and communication support. So that was the guiding principles that drove this budget. So as the overview, last year, the approved FY21 budget, which ran through June 30th of 2020, this budget we're in now, 21, was $56,739,885. So that's what we call the base budget. That's where we start from. When we met earlier in the year, we needed to create what we call a level services budget. And so level services are things that require us to have, if we change nothing, if we added nothing to our budget, these are the things that would give us a similar level of services for the upcoming year. I will also say we based our budget on a March 2020 And although that is still unclear what our exact enrollment will be in the fall, that was the premise we began with, or the assumption we began with, is that we would start from the 2020 March enrollment. So with the just the level services increase, these take all of our things such as salary and benefit increases, negotiations, all the things that we have in the budget, equipment, supplies, etc. That level of services increases amounts to a $2,521,066. Now, for our level services budget, we also had to include this year. We had some revenue losses that we've talked about several times in the past weeks. And revenue losses where we didn't run the KIA program, the Kids in Action program, full-day kindergarten enrollment. We didn't do full-day kindergarten, so we did not have $900,000 worth of revenue, etc. And at the end of the year, we end up with revenue losses just to start the year that we have to make up for the FY22 season of $545,437. When you add those things together, the level services FY22 budget amounts to $59,796,588. So that's 5.4% increase just to keep us exactly where we are today. Now, in the FY22 recovery budget items, and I see now I have I didn't hit recovery versus recover budget item increase. So these are the things that are in the budget what we're calling the recovery budget. So we focused this year on those things that we talked about in the previous slide that really we needed to be able to address the needs of our students who've missed a lot of school over the last year. Those increases amount to $2,486,228. So when you add that to the level services budget, you have a total proposed FY22 budget of $62,282,816, which is 9.79%. So the recovery budget. So the recovery budget includes the level services budget plus the addition of the academic and social emotional supports and services for the students that we believe are necessary to recover from the disruption of education due to the COVID-19 crisis. The recovery budget includes, for each elementary school, 2 contract adjustment counselors, which I'll say it's shared amongst the 4 schools. For each elementary school, we have 1 literacy specialist, so that's 4 total. 1 math tutor, and that's another 4. 1 math paraeducator, that's 4 additional paraeducators, and 1 district-wide elementary writing specialist. So again, really looking at that academic side and intervening on academics. In the special education recovery, we have 1 special education administrator at the elementary, 1 at the secondary. The reason for that is we had a substantial increase in the number of students being identified or referred for evaluation. We need people on the ground in the schools, working with the families and working with the schools to assist with the services to those children and coordination. In addition, we have 4 additional special education teachers due to the number of students we anticipate, and 3 speech and language therapists. At the middle school, we have 1 literacy specialist, a math specialist, 2 math tutors, and 1 STEM teacher. The STEM teacher is an ongoing. We've been adding that each year. That's been a priority for the district, and again, allows us to address the needs of many children who have missed out on a lot of opportunities with advancing their science and engineering and math coursework. At the high school, we have 1 guidance counselor. Our high school numbers are as high as they've been over in 20 years, or higher than they've been in the last 20 years. And so we have the addition of a guidance counselor there, understanding that we also have to, along with the number of students we have, also addressing the social emotional needs of our high school students who will be returning to school, because we do anticipate we will be fully in school on or before fall, that's for sure. Also, we have a 0.5 directed study teacher, and that teacher would be an intervention teacher that would work with students who are struggling in a classroom. And then, of course, with some of the numbers we have in our other classes, 0.25 English teacher, 0.5 health teacher, a 0.6 math teacher, and then the world languages, being able to offer a wide range of world languages after the pandemic of 1.20 full-time equivalents. And finally, the district-wide support for recovery budget. We have the 1 data analyst communications administrative assistant that we talked about earlier. also the William James College Interface Referral System, which is the ability for our guidance counselors and our adjustment counselors to work with the outside agencies to ensure that the mental health needs of our students are met. We have in the budget a placeholder for a district-wide math intervention program. That's yet to be determined. They're still researching those to decide what is best for us. And then, as we said, we have strategic planning, which is really about the future, about putting our resources into the places that they need to be, and having a plan for the next 5 years for the strategic plan for the district over the next 5 years. And of course, the equity planning that we talked about is implementing year one of our equity inclusion. Those are the things in the recovery budget. Now, I want to go back to the adjusted summary. If you look on the right side of this, see the 1 year over year preliminary budget comparisons. So our preliminary budget when we started was $62,478,220, which was over a 10% increase. And on the left side, we've adjusted some of those things. We've been able to actually reduce that by $195,404, and so we now are down to a 9.79% increase. We're a total budget of $62,282,816. These here are our backup sheets, and pretty much they just roll out each of the area. The blue is the general education, as you can, what we rolled out post January 7th. The general education, the green is the special education, and the red is vocational tech programs. And again, at the very bottom, you see that the proposed budget has increased to 9.79%. And John, do you want to talk a little bit about these? You want me to John Ferris, please?
Yes. Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
You are, John. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is just what these are, just backup detail to the cover sheet. So, it gets us back down to 9.79 in the budget that Dr. Austin just talked about. And what it does is it itemizes the change post January 7th when we first introduced the preliminary budget. So it's just another look of that cover sheet, but it provides some detail so people can see that by far the biggest change in this budget for that 195 was an offset from circuit breaker. Initially, when the circuit breaker came in, I had estimated $1.6 million because our first payment was only $400,000 from the DESC. But since then, in December, they published a new figure. So we know circuit breaker is going to be running at 1.7 million. So that actually helps reduce our budget by 196. I won't go into the other items, but if they're there, this presentation is up on the website so people can look at it and see the detail. Basically, it's just tracking the changes from January 7th. If you want to go. Dr. Austin expressed these in a different way. Basically, I itemized them by elementary and secondary. These are all those same item numbers that he talked about earlier. And it shows you the summary account where they sit in. So if you track back to the overall budget, you can see the account that they're impacting, and you can see the positive impacts there of the budget going up or being increases from basically a level services budget. So it just provides a little bit more detail to the public, so you have some feeling for what that 20.94 million, $2,094,228 is, or the 392, which are really the non-return or perhaps one-time charges.
And just so that people know, when you put those two figures together, the 392 and the 2094, that makes up the whole $2 million for part of the recovery budget. So some of those things we anticipate being one-time expenses, such as the plan, $50,000, or the equity plan for another $25,000. Some of the summer programs, and as we said, the elementary contracted adjustment counselors, all would be in the what we hope to be one-time non-recurring death.
Yep, correct, yes. Good, Julie. So once again, just another look at this, folks. It's all the same numbers and the same items, just sort of cut up a different way. So, for visual learners, you can get your perspective whatever way you'd like, but basically tracks the same thing along with a note at the side on the left-hand column that basically says, what the items sort of cover, whether it be, HTSS, which is Hagan's tier of support system, and more services or social emotional sort of recovery, supervision, and you can read the other ones in the future, the other ones below, and where strategic and plan and equity is rebuilding the future. Those are areas that we really need to look in so that we can set the directions of this district going forward. Dr. Austin talked about those revenue losses of 545. This just gives you, another picture of the types of revenue losses or drivers that actually increase that level services budget up to the 5.454%. Estimated full day K revenue losses, for 2020. The budget for this year had 980,000. We're not predicting that for next year. It's more like 614. So what this does is show, when you don't collect the same amount of revenues one year to the next, basically that produces a structural deficit in a budget, and therefore it has to be made up by some other source of funds. So that's where you see the revenue losses. And this is just a cut at another look at some of those additional drivers and splitting them up into different categories so the public can see, what the items are. I say fluctuate for some because they may go up or down year to year. And, some expenses could be permanent if they're based on revenues, depending on enrollment or other situations. Those could go up every year. Sometimes they could go up, sometimes they could go down. So they may fluctuate from year to year. So it's just another peek at those items. Dr. Austin, you want to talk about this? Or let me talk about
Sure. So how much does the school system really spend when tuition fee grants and enrollment counts are added in? One of the things in the FY22 budget, from federal grants, if you look down through our total budget, what we actually, total school budget is $68,887,707. So the capital budget, that's with the capital budget, $2,406,838 plus the $66,480,869. Of that, we fund that through a number of grants. Federal grants, the IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act, and the Title IV grant is equal to about $839,054, and then another early childhood grant of $13,490. We have state reimbursement grants to circuit breaker, which John just talked about, which was higher this year. Last year was 1,652,110. This year is close to 1.8 million of 1,796,301. And then the METCO grant, which we anticipate to be relatively similar to last year, 135,311. Our tuition charges, so obviously we are looking at our full day K, and right now we've added, because we just don't know exactly how many new students we're going to have. So typically we include about $980,000 for that. This year we've lowered that projection until we get a better handle on this, which will be happening very soon in March. We'll get a much better idea of how many students we have full day K.
If I could interject one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Full day K. It's not typical that it's 980. 980 was a much bigger year simply because there was it's an estimating process that's taking place 18 months before a budget happens every year. So if you don't estimate enough revenue the next year, you'd make up for it. So that 980 represents a makeup from prior year or two of throwing more of the tuition balance from that account into the budget.
And I appreciate that, John. Last year was my first year, so it was the only one I saw. So thank you. This year is $661,015, and then pre-K tuition set at $220,000. Student fees to high school athletics, we account for about $358,308 in the budget, and the middle school activity fund at $50,000. Other budget credits, the rental accounts, when we rent things, 58,957, and then food services and kids in action bring in about 73,500. So the school generated offsets are approximately 4,204,936, which accounts for 6.10%. And then, John, why don't you talk about that last number, that taxpayer local receipt and state aid town?
Yeah, okay. So, and just want to mention, so the food service and the kids in action, because of COVID, we lost a lot of money in those accounts, so we don't have really adequate balances. So that's why you see those amounts down for FY22. But yeah, so the from a town perspective, we look at generated revenue. So when you look at our overall budget, the rest of the funding of that 93.9% really comes from the taxpayer, you, the voters, and taxpayers from real estate taxes, from local receipts, and from state aid, and from other types of miscellaneous revenues that the town may collect. So, when you look at it from a municipality, that's about all there is. It's the real estate taxes, the excise taxes, local receipts, ambulance, state aid. That's not meant to be a completely exhaustive list, but when you look at this, we're talking about those are sort of some of the big chunks. Meals tax would be in there too, but that information is readily available too. That's always these are numbers that are incorporated into the town's revenue forecast, which is really all the revenues for the town. They look at the entire levy, and so this is just telling you that about $64 million of our proposed budget is funded by the town. We're requesting that much sort of be funded by the town. And, in the previous year, that same amount was like the 57,911, which is really comprised of that budget that we did get, the 56 plus the capital we got, that was 1.39. So just a different way of looking at things. These would tie back to those numbers that you saw. This is our offsets to our proposed budget and how we use those offsets in the budget every year. I think we put this out here basically so the public can understand that even though we may be coming in at a budget of that 62 million or the 57 million, that there's all this incremental spending that's happening. It's coming from revenues that the school system may collect, or from other grants and tuitions that the school system may charge. Earlier we talked about what is the FY22 budget based on. So this was the March 1, 2020 enrollment. So when we entered this year, it's like, okay, where are we going to start? So we're starting with March 1, 2020. With the idea that in September everything's going to be the same. We're going to be back to school. All the kids coming back. We're going to make it. We're going to get everybody in, and we're going to be back and going forward. So I put this up here for people to see where our enrollment was. This is clearly where we do a budget. We sort of project out where the enrollments are going and stuff. This would just be, taking the March data and saying, hey, what do I think I'm going to have for my FY22 budget? So just to see that we do look at these numbers and we do sort of track them to determine, what we anticipate enrollment to be. So whether we think it's going to be down significantly or up significantly. The reality is I've done this over many, many years, and, we tend to grow 30 to 50 a year, or we may decrease 30. And then we have these bubbles that come up over time. And working with the MSBA and having done an enrollment study a couple of years ago, our enrollment should be, really holding steady to slightly increasing, even though we're dealing with the COVID issue, in this year's budget, in this year's enrollment. So here's a picture. So you look at our enrollment history. October 1 is the DESC's official count of enrollment every year. So what I've just done is backtrack here so everybody can see. So in October 1, our official count, this is the DESC count, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, was 4,300. 2018, it was 4,249. 4264. March 20 was 4267. And this year, the October 1 count, 3894. And we have to report these all the time. And actually the town accountant reports them too. And whenever I sent this number to her, she said, John, did you know that you sent me 3894? That's the reality this year. And I mention that because everybody should be aware that we're hopeful that this won't happen. But the Chapter 70 funding, that state aid, if you go back to one of those other pages, that state aid piece that we get from the state, that helps, Chapter 70 helps fund the school budget, is tied to students and the number of students. So, this could negatively impact our state aid Chapter 70 funding this year or next year. Although we do believe that the numbers will come up, we expect that many schools are experiencing a similar situation. And, we do think that the legislators, governor, the president, and other people in this country are aware of the significant difficulties schools are facing. And at some point, maybe we'll be held harmless for this.
So this is the end of our presentation, and Carrie, I'll turn it back over to you for public comment questions for you to run this part.
Great, thank you. So these are the guidelines basically for public comment. Please state your name and address clearly. These questions and comments that we're hearing now, our role is to listen to you and to your concerns, but they have to be concerning the fiscal year 2022 budget. We're going to limit them to 3 minutes each, and we'll take note of all the comments, and as I noted earlier, we may not be responding to all of them, but they will drive the conversation going forward. Okay, so with that being said, the first hand I see is Priya Howell. Priya, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Priya Howell, 26 Delpret. I have 4 kids, and my youngest 2 are twins currently in the 1st grade. They just received their report cards, and they're pretty much behind in all of the literacy-related standards. And I know they aren't alone, and this is despite all of the time and money we've invested in additional private tutoring, not just this year, but going back to when school stopped in March. There was a post recently on Facebook where parents were discussing report cards, and there was a chorus of parents of elementary school kids all talking about how their 1st graders got straight 2s in the literacy-related topics. One mom talked about how her child got 2s, but nonetheless was taken out of their small group support. Another said she wanted to have her child evaluated, but even though the child was getting 2s and was behind, the teacher thought that they were not behind enough to actually get help. And
sorry, Priya, is this related to the 2022 budget?
It is. I joke this was all fine because 2nd grade is going to be like the new kindergarten, but I'm afraid that come fall we're going to find out that this isn't really a joke. So my twins have been in small reading groups to get extra literacy support since October, and these sessions are actually some of the most effective sessions that they've had. Because it's a small group, they get called on a lot, it's engaging for them, but just because of the limited number of resources that the schools have, these small group sessions get canceled all the time. They get canceled because the reading specialists have to conduct assessments, or because they're trying to meet one-on-one with some students, which means they have to free up time by canceling the small group sessions with other students. And so while this current budget includes a request for funds for new FTEs, including 1 new reading specialist for elementary school, I think it's critical that we fund this budget, and I've said so pretty much to anyone who will listen to me. But I'm just increasingly concerned that this budget is not enough, and we have the highest student-to-teacher ratios of our benchmark towns and the lowest per pupil expenditures. And I don't see how just 1 additional reading specialist for elementary school is going to address the literacy crisis we're going to see when kids are coming back to school. And similarly, I know we are looking to hire 2 more adjustment counselors, but the American School Counselor Association recommends that schools have 1 adjustment counselor for 250 kids. If we have 4,000 kids in the district, we're currently at a ratio of 1 adjustment counselor per 500 kids. And even after adding the 2 contracted positions, we'll be only at 1 counselor per 400 kids.
Okay, all right, thank you, Priya. Next is Elizabeth Moulds.
Hi, Elizabeth Moulds at 70 Winter Street. I would like to reiterate Priya's concerns that the current proposed budget does not go far enough. I was concerned about this before COVID, so to see the proposed budget just making up for the problems that popped up in the last year during COVID, yes, obviously we need to address those, but why the timidity? We have been below our benchmark towns and per pupil expenditures for so long, since I've moved here. And I don't understand the timidity here. This is the time to make up for COVID as best we can, but also to build and try to really improve what we've been providing to our students. I've got kids, very different learners, and I don't think either one of their needs were met the way I expected them to be in Hingham Public Schools. I have one child who needs more small group attention, and I have one child who could have used a lot more challenge, and I don't think that they got that even before COVID. So I would really encourage the school committee, the administration, to go to the Board of Selectmen and advocate to not just tread water with our schools, but to actively improve the experience that our kids are getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Timothy Dempsey.
Hey, I have a little nuts and bolts question first. In the recovery budget, the new positions, are any of those positions just one-year positions, or are those all multi-year ongoing positions?
I believe the adjustment counselor, or one of the adjustment counselors, was a contracted position.
Do you want me to answer that real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, in our funding, so that $2,400,000, that's the recovery budget. About 400 of that is what we consider to be non-recurring. So in that is strategic planning budget, the equity planning, the one-time purchase of the math program, and the 2 contracted adjustment counselors for that first year. So that's included in that 400. But there is a separate fee for that on the slideshow. That breaks out just one time.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I'm so sorry, Neditsko?
Rebecca Nedisitko, 5 Lay Pond Lane. I just wanted to ask about something that was discussed in earlier meetings. We had mentioned the possibility of consultants to help with scheduling, Aspen consultants for middle school and high schoolers, and also the idea that we might need alternate spaces if we're going to different spacing in some of the schools that are more space challenged. So I don't know if that means tents or if that means mobile classrooms, but I was unclear if there are lines for anything sort of pandemic and unusual related in the budget. I didn't see it, and I'd love to know if there were. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dr. Austin, do you want to answer that one?
There's not anything considering space issues.
I think our assumption was that the students will be in school full time in the fall, if not before. Jen Frizzoli.
Thank you very much. Jen Frizzoli, 6 Myers Farm. I too am in support of increasing the budget, and I rely on the professionals to ask and determine how much we need. But in sort of listening to what you've laid out here, my concern is around hopeful that we are back in school full time next year. How will you, because you've laid out lots of positions, you've laid out a math intervention program. It's not clear to me accessibility of programs that you're going to offer to all students. So what I mean by that is that how will you identify educational gaps that we need to close for all students? So as a parent, am I going to have to go through requesting testing, qualifying for like 504s,
IEPs, or am I going to be able to trust that the educators in the schools are going to assess those gaps using, whether it's MCAS or whatever or tests you use, and that you're going to provide tutoring, provide intervention programs to close the gaps for my students? So I guess it's a comment and a question. Do you have the appropriate amount of money in there to make those services and the intervention programs accessible to all students, regardless of whether or not they have a binding special, IEP 504, whatever the documents in place need to be?
I'll say quickly, I believe the quick answer to that, yes, we do believe we have that. Dr. LaBilwa, do you want to add anything to the HTSS academic program that she's talking about now, and or Mary Andrews? I know you're online too. Anybody would like to speak to it? Thank you.
I would be pleased to talk about it. I want to first start by explaining to the couple of earlier comments. Right now, in elementary school, there is one full-time reading specialist and 3 tutors to service 500 plus kids. The plan as proposed right now for academic support has a full-time reading specialist, a full-time literacy specialist, a full-time math specialist, and 4 full-time interventionists at every elementary school. So it's really not, we're actually making a pretty significant increase, and that is not just related to COVID. Okay, so for the past 4 years, since I've arrived in the district 5 years ago, I've consistently been presenting to the school committee persistent achievement gaps between all students and students with disabilities, students who are low income and ELL, as well as students of color. Though, regardless of what intervention we're putting into place day to day in the classrooms, the reality is that data is not changing. So our achievement gaps persist. And this, I want to be really clear, for those that might have been engaged for the last few years, has been an ongoing dialogue with the school committee around the level of intervention and support that we give to our students. To more specifically address your question, all of our students are actually screened 3 times a year, particularly at elementary level, in their reading and their mathematics skills. So to your exact question, we're right now conducting a fairly comprehensive data analysis, which we presented to the committee, hopefully at their February 22nd meeting, specifically outlining how this year's cohort of students compares against last year's cohort of students, as well as all of the previous students from that grade going back to 2011. So we actually have about 9 years of data. So I know, for example, where the mean performance on letter word fluency was for every first grader going back to 2011. And so the goal is from that data set to construct a norm sample and then sort of compare last year's kids against the norm, this year's kids against the norm, and then this year's kids against last year's students. And again, exactly to your point, that's how we're attempting to find out. Part of what makes the report card challenging to use as a metric is it's standards-based. So it's not as if our teachers don't give, for example, quizzes and take the average of the quizzes and that becomes a 2. They actually have to assess to what extent is each student actually meeting the standard. And that's very different than where do individual students' skills lie. And so to your question, the original point was the HTSS model is designed to provide specialist level support in reading, literacy, and mathematics in every single elementary school, as well as 4 full-time interventionists whose role it will be, to the earlier comment, to actually give small group and individualized support to kids who need it without requiring a special education or 504 evaluation. Now, that said, parents always have the right under federal law to request an evaluation of their children, and that should be put in writing to the building principal and to our director of student services. But our plan, as outlined, was the culmination of multi-years of work with a district-wide task force of administrators, teachers, support personnel, to actually talk about what do we need to advance our intervention program forward. And the timing, really, the same request was actually made of the school committee about a year ago, sort of pre-COVID, that this was our level of need at that time. To your latter point around how do we know what are those gaps, that's what we're working on right now. That was actually my weekend, was sort of building the data sets to begin the comparative analysis, and we hope to have that report completed for the committee by February 22nd.
Thank you, Dr. Bull.
Next is George Moore.
Hi, Kirsten Moore, 120 South Pleasant Street. I have two questions. My first is, I note that full-day kindergarten is planned for the next academic school year, and that there were statements made to hope to get the kids back in full-time. However, nothing has been put forward, and nothing has certainly been put in writing with regards to if and when these kids go back to school full-time. A question was previously raised with regards to there was nothing noted in the budget with regards to extra classrooms, spacing, and availability to get the kids back into school. So it seems there's a large vacuum at this point in time in how we are going to be going about this. Second, there were record low enrollment with regards to this school year. As far as I understand, private school applications, after talking to a friend at admissions, is at 6 times its normal high right now. Everyone I know who has put their children into private school for next year is not putting their children back into the Hingham public school systems. They have lost their ability to trust it at this point in time. If we do not keep these numbers at where they are and we keep declining in the enrollment for these schools, state and federal funding will continue to go down. At this point in time, all I see is a downward spiral in enrollment and money. And how are we going to address this issue if we do not raise this budget? Otherwise, we'll be perpetuating the problem.
Okay, thank you. Next, Lynn Vanderhoven.
There's no addressing to that point. There's no answer how we are going to address this. It was a question.
Right, and as I noted, we're writing all these questions down and we're listening, and we will use this to drive the conversation forward. I will say that again, Dr. Aspen will be giving an update on our progress towards more in-person learning later. Okay, Lynn Vanderhoven.
Hi, great, thanks. Thanks everyone for allowing us to have this forum. I know sometimes these are tricky. Just to build on the woman's last question, who didn't get answered, I will too mention, as parents who have their children in public school, we don't have the option of saying, I'm going to take my money and go someplace else unless we sell our home or we go into a private school. And I don't think that that's what anyone wants. Otherwise, I don't think there would be so much outcry in town. So I think that's something to really pay attention to. The enrollment, if I was putting my child in kindergarten now, I don't know what I would do. But that wasn't my question. So my question is more along the lines of, I have 2 children on IEPs, and recently I was sent a letter about the compensatory services that are going to be afforded to us. And I feel like the gap between children on IEPs and children on 504s and the Gen Ed population is getting smaller and smaller, especially based on what an earlier woman said about her child and is he going to be tested. Here's my question. My youngest child was told that for compensatory services we needed 8 times 30 times 6, 6 times 30 times 6, 6 times 30 times 6 after school. He's 10. He's on Zoom in a classroom, he's on Zoom at home, he's in classes. Would we consider looking at, rather than putting all of that money into compensatory services this year, because I'm not going to send him, I can't do that to him. Would we consider, one, looking at what we're going to try and invest in compensatory services this year to make up for last spring and push it into next year? And 2, would we consider looking at a model of a push-in instead of a pull-out? Because there are school districts where they push support into the classroom. My son comes home and says, I don't know, I wasn't there because he's pulled out so frequently, and we're going to have so many pull-outs, we're not going to have space for them. So how do we do that?
Okay, again, this is about the budget only, and I know everything comes back to the budget and it relates, but that is something that we can write down and we can address with the special education department. Next, Tim Dempsey.
I'm sorry, did people who didn't speak want to go before me? I'm kind of sneaking in a second question. I don't want to jump the line.
Why don't you just go? It's easier.
Okay. I have 2 kids that were both in the music program this year. Both of them had to drop it this year in order to fit in other services. So I know there's a lot of want to talk about, it must be disheartening to have a 10%, nearly 10% increase in the budget, and people keep coming to what's not in it. But I'm another one of those people. Just noting that it's another year we don't have a fine arts director, and I don't think any department probably would have benefited more from one than the fine arts this year. I think we're really in a position of rebuilding the program next year because so many kids had to drop instruments, and I really feel like the fine arts programs have really been decimated by COVID in a way that, everyone's been decimated, but it's really particular to them. So just acknowledging that because there was no director to oversee the programs this year, the programs kind of fell apart, and a lot of people dropped music this year that I've talked to. So looking ahead to next year to maybe get that in future budgets and to make sure that although the numbers in the fine arts are declining, that we don't use that as a reason to then cut the programs. We need to rebuild them, not cut them.
Okay, thank you. Mara Gallagher?
Mara Gallagher, 12 Percy Street. I just wanted to comment that while I hope that everything is, back full-time in person in the fall, I really would hope that in the budget, we would be looking to add things like portable classrooms, extra space, to plan for, basically hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Because I'm very concerned about whether it's realistic to think that the current space is going to work, particularly at the high school level where I have kids, but really throughout the district. So I would just ask that consideration be given to adding space or having at least money budgeted to add what we need in terms of space, in terms of extra help at recesses, lunches, in terms of paras, etc. Planning ahead for next fall, and hopefully we'll be all back in and things will be quote unquote normal. But if they're not, I just hope that the budget will reflect funds to make things as normal as possible under what are likely to still be with us in terms of COVID constraints. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Next, we have Eileen Bevins.
Thank you for that detailed explanation about how elementary students will be assessed on literacy and math. Is there something similar for high school level students in terms of that type of assessment? I just haven't heard that.
Yeah, I can jump if you don't mind, Chairman Lee. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a great question. I mean, we're looking at it a little differently because secondary doesn't have the same kind of screening tools that we use across elementary. We do have it in grade 6 for math. So we do have a math program that runs which screens all of our students in math skills. But we're actually working with our secondary content directors to determine what are the best metrics, whether that's grades or sort of performance on core anchor assessments or common assessments that we give to sort of determine what is the best way to get a handle on exactly the academic impact that COVID has had on student, or the impact that COVID has had on student performance. And that's only because we don't have, now we do have social and emotional, let me rephrase. For social and emotional functioning, we actually have data across the entire district. We do those screenings frequently, but in academic performance, we don't have that same data for grade 7 and up. So we're working with our department directors to figure out and our coordinators to figure out what are the best ways to capture and assess that impact where we don't have skill-based data like we do for our kindergarten through 5th graders. And 6th grade rather, but only in mathematics. So I don't know exactly what to say just yet because we're still working through what those metrics will be. But we're doing a very similar study, but just doing it with the secondary level, looking at different data sets because they don't have the same availability of that screening data like we do in elementary.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Kristen Moore.
Hi. I had a question with regards to my second question, and I wasn't sure if this was included in the budget, as I didn't see it, and that's with regards to textbooks. Right now, my daughter, who is in high school, has brought home textbooks that are at least 18 years old. These textbooks do not have the updated ability with regards to online accommodations that textbooks purchased now have. There's no online reading, there's no listening skills, there's no extra questions or any ability with regards to this. So I'm wondering if and when we will be seeing updated textbooks in the Hingham schools.
Thank you. Dr. Aspen, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the textbook line, and John, if you want to jump in here, we had in the textbook line itself, there's almost $500,000. It's $499,000 in that textbook line, which is an increase. I believe. I just want to make sure I got to read across it in time, so I apologize. John, you want anything to that?
Charles, I could actually add that we actually have, in collaboration with our coordinators and our department directors, an ongoing textbook review update cycle. And so the budget line that Dr. Austin is referring to is the line that actually funds that line. That said, I am not aware of an 18 or 20-year-old textbook. So if you could reach out and let me know, I can connect you with that department director who can talk to you a little bit more about sort of the process they employ for that department. But we do have those funds available annually, and those are for, exactly to your point, the sort of refreshing and renewing of our textbook materials for student learning. So if you wanted to reach out offline and just let me know what class you're referring to, I can connect you with the appropriate director who can talk to you more about the process they use to sort of review and adopt a new textbook series.
Okay, thank you. Dave Bullock?
Hey there. So I'm going to add to the voices around budget earmarks for COVID and COVID contingencies, even if that budget was put in as a contingency as opposed to committed, whether it's space or headcount or whatever it is. It seems like not having a contingency line like that in the budget is essentially a guarantee that we will be going back in school live in person. Therefore, we don't need the budget. It seems like if there's any doubt at all, it would only be prudent to put a budget in there to accommodate additional space or, again, whatever it is, to make sure it does in fact happen. So I think it's a big miss if it's not in there, unless we are, like I said, 100%. I don't imagine how we could be 100%. But if we don't ask for it and we don't get it, I think what the angst that we are seeing now in the town will be tenfold. So I suggest we consider it.
Thank you. Lisa Carter?
Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Carter on 114 East Street. I want to thank the school committee and the superintendent for all your hard work. These have been these meetings endless and challenging, and I really respect you all. I would like to put a question / plug into a consideration for reconsidering class size. I think if we're thinking about students having a lot of academic need, first graders not reading yet, or third graders not ready for MCAS, which will probably happen next year, even if for some magic they don't have to take this year. And then again, the social emotional aspect. We know that so many of our kids have anxiety and feel disconnected. That having a counselor in the school can be really helpful, and especially for the outliers or the kids that are externalizers or really high need or really low in terms of academic support. But I think so many kids would benefit from more small group and interaction with their teacher. I know my current first grader is in a group of 14, and that's just because so many families left. And her teacher can give her so much attention because she only has 14 6-year-olds. So I do think that, that's lucky, although it's unfortunate for all the families that chose to find other schools for their kids this year. But I don't know, I think that if we could reconsider having 22 second graders in a room or whatever number we cap it at, we would see a big effect across the town and not just for the kids who make their way to the school counselor or to the literacy interventionist.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. And then Jen Rosoli?
Thank you. I just have one other comment or suggestion that may have already happened, but as you go through this budgeting process, it occurs to me that as a member of that Supporters of Hingham Schools Facebook page,
there have been so many wonderful resources in this community with fabulous ideas. Have you involved any of them in the budget process? And I'm thinking, for example, many parents have offered to do fundraising. I just feel like there might be an opportunity here to incorporate some of these ideas in a positive, collaborative way, where parents could join in and with the, so many intelligent people in this community that they've put forth some wonderful ideas to be collaborative and getting more money into this budget. So I'm just thinking that, people have offered to do fundraisers. Could you give them something to fundraise for this budget? Textbooks, as an example, is something that came up. I think you should leverage the collective intelligence and knowledge in this community for something that people would feel that they could help with.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, and I just want to thank everyone for your suggestions and your questions and your comments. This is really helpful. It's great food for thought for the committee, and as this is a long process, this won't be the last time we discuss it, so we really welcome all of your input. So that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn the public hearing to resume the open school committee meeting.
I'll make the motion to adjourn open comment meeting.
The public hearing?
Public hearing.
Yeah. Okay, great. Do we have a second? I'll second. Thank you. And roll call. Michelle Ayer? Aye. Jen Benham?
Aye.
Ness Carenti? Aye. Carlos De Silva? Did we lose Carlos? Okay, Libby Lurkey?
Aye.
And Liza O'Reilly? Aye. And I'm an aye as well. So the public hearing is adjourned at 8:17, and we will resume our regular school committee meeting with item 6, which is the superintendent's report, a COVID-19 and district reopening update. Dr. Austin?
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for great suggestions on the budget. Much appreciated. So the first thing I'm going to do, as I always do, is give you an update on the COVID-19 numbers, and then after that, I have another PowerPoint that I want to talk about, which I think will address some of the other comments and questions I had tonight. So this weekly, the weekly metrics are just ended to 6. In town, once again, we continue to see the numbers of COVID-19 and Hingham continue to reduce. We are still in the yellow with 54.8 cases per 100,000, but we are certainly moving down in the right direction, and testing positive test rate, which has to be below 5 in order to be in the yellow range, is 4.65. So we're heading in the right direction, and I appreciate everybody's vigilance. I will take this opportunity to say that the next week is travel week, to remain vigilant on that, and that this is important, and we want to keep everyone healthy and safe. So anyway, next slide. So one of the things that I've done now is we've actually we have broken out our cumulative tests for Hingham Public Schools. So in total, we've had now 183 through 2/6/21. 183, that's students and staff. The blue line underneath that, the 141, represent the student numbers we had. So we had 11 more students last week from 130 to 2/6. And then the red line below is the staff. So we had another 6 staff test positive during that week, and so we had a total of 42. So that's how that 183 breaks down: 141 student cases, 42 staff cases. Underneath that is the breakout of how they are broken down between where they're at. So in the high school we had 6, at the middle school we had 7, and at the pre-K through 5 we had 4. So our numbers in the pre-K through 5 have been fairly low over the last 3 weeks, which we'll talk to a little bit later. And then quarantine, we still have, this week we have about 80 students and staff in quarantine. Most of that is students. We do have 12 staff who've been in quarantine this week from COVID-19. But again, we are heading in the right direction, certainly way away from where we peaked way back in January. So we continue to be vigilant with this and quarantine as we need to. It's nice to see the quarantine 3, not that 14-day period, because many people can come back after 7. If they test after 5 days and they test negative, they come back on day 8. And so that's very important, and it helps us get our numbers down. And then the last thing I will say right now, we are actually testing all of our staff who wish to be tested. And so we started that on the 14th of January. And at this point, we've run over 700 tests. We've run 703 tests. We've had one positive result, which is for a percentage of positive testing is 0.14%. So very, very low, well below 1.1%. And so we will continue to test our staff as they wish. And then at this point, I didn't talk about pool testing yet, but our intent is to begin the pilot of pool testing. We have over 850 people, families now that have signed up for that. So we're looking forward to that after the break to begin our pool testing surveillance of COVID spread in students. So that's the COVID update. And Gary, do you want me to go right into my next one, or do you want me to take questions on that first?
So why don't we see if we have any questions? Or is there any questions from the school committee about the COVID update? Not seeing any. If any members of the public have questions about the COVID update, if you could just raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So why don't we?
No, you got one. You got one.
Yeah, I see. Mike Taylor.
Hi, my name is Mike Taylor. I live at 20 Liberty Road in Hingham. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, Mike.
Great. Hey, Dr. Austin, thanks very much for taking the time and reviewing the numbers with us. Just a question in terms of your numbers that you went through relative to the students and the staff. Do you benchmark against other towns or look at other towns' data in comparison with ours just to get a sense of how we're doing against our peers?
Yeah, we actually quite often the superintendents talk about the numbers they're seeing, and the things that we're really truly benchmarking about are relative to if they're seeing student spread, student to staff, staff to student spread. I mean, they differ, depending on where you are, how large your school system is. But the things that we're most interested in is that evidence around the spread of COVID-19 among students. And so that's the information I generally seek, and that's been very good information for us. We, as I will say in a few minutes, we've had very little spread, very little student to student. We've had no student to staff, and so the numbers are very good. And I'm going to speak to that in my planning that I'm going to present in just a few moments.
Thank you, Priya Howell.
Sorry about that. Actually, I think Dr. Austin maybe just answered my question. So far in the testing that you've seen, there has been no student to staff spread?
Right, we've had no, and everything is self-reported to us, Brad. So we count on everybody telling us what they've, where they've, certainly contact tracing that we do, where they've contracted the disease, etc. We've had no evidence whatsoever of a student to staff spread. But that is the evidence we have.
Great, thank you. Lauren Byrne?
Yes. So, Dr. Austin, just to that point, I think you just said something pretty important. And again, it's February 8th. We've been in this for almost a year. We have not been able to show through data any spread. So why can't the kids go back to school? Does the HEA have that data? Because that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, the data is available to everyone, and I'm going to talk about, I think, some of the questions that you have in just a minute.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So if you want to go on to your next presentation.
Okay, everybody, thank you, and I thank everyone for their patience. This has been a long process. I know there's a lot of questions out there. I know there's a lot of desire in the community. We've been working hard on that. The school committee, myself, the other administrators, and the HEA working very diligently to work on some very hard solutions to the problems we face. I'm going to do a presentation tonight about a plan I'm going to propose to the school committee that I'm going to ask that they consider tonight and then take a formal vote on the 22nd. So with that, I'm going to ask, Julie, if you pull up my slides there. Very good, thank you. Start the slideshow for me. There we go. So as we start this tonight, I want to say, first of all, Hingham Public Schools is committed to increasing in-person learning for all students in the safest and most responsible manner possible. We are committed to the safe operations of our school system, which that ensures, to the best of our ability, the health and safety of our 3,927 students and 700 plus staff. The proposal tonight prioritizes our youngest learners and is based upon changing conditions of COVID-19 in our schools and community, the anticipated availability of a vaccine for staff in the very near future, scientific evidence, the need to ensure consistent structured learning time experiences, and includes reasonable measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in our schools, which impacts the health and safety of both staff and students. We recognize how difficult the last 11 months have been on our students, our families, and our staff. We understand that no plan during the pandemic will universally satisfy all staff, families, or students. However, we must also understand the impact the pandemic has had on student learning, and we must be fully committed to providing the supports and services necessary to ensure that every learner is in our best interests. So why is the change needed? Regardless of the quality of our online programming, nothing can replicate in-person learning for our students, particularly our youngest learners in grades K through 5. Isolation from peers and educators impacts the social and emotional well-being of both our students and our educators. Simultaneous teaching the student at home and in person is challenging, particularly for elementary students, and most so for our very early learners K through 1 and 2. The longer we remain in hybrid, the greater the risk for academic regression, particularly in our very young learners. Students want to be in school daily to see their teacher and their friends. Families want to return to work. COVID-19 in our state, in our community, and our schools is reducing. Science does support that schools can be operated safely with proper mitigation, measures such as wearing masks, hand washing, surveillance testing, and maintaining physical distance. So why is an adjustment to our learning model appropriate now? Foster North is open and operating. Elementary cafeteria and specialty spaces are now available that were previously used for classrooms and special education services. No student in school transmission since mid-December. Staff testing has been initiated and student surveillance testing will be initiated after the February break. The Hingham community has responded to the request of lower community rates. Hingham has achieved the yellow status for 3 consecutive weeks, and that school age rates are the lowest. The goal of 35 hours per week of structured learning time addressed in-person learning. So our proposal is to launch phase 3, full in-person learning K to 5. Hingham Public Schools will transition from the hybrid learning model to the full in-person learning model for grades 1 through 5. All HPS grades K through 5 students, those are the non-remote, will return to full-time in-person learning on or before March 15, 2021, with grades 1 through 5 attending full days. So this is 5 days a week, 6-hour day they regularly had, assuming the regular schedule. So we're leaving hybrid and going to a full in-person model on March 15. We'll have to ask the families to commit either in-person or remote learning to limit the enrollment classroom changes between in-person and remote learning students. South, East, Foster, and North Campus and Plymouth River Elementary Schools will operate a full-day schedule 5 days per week. The district will ensure 3 to 6 foot physical distancing students in grades K through 5. The school lunch program will resume with the start of phase 3, and the district will ensure 6 foot spacing for all students during lunch, snack, and mask breaks. The district will ensure that educators may maintain at least 6 feet of physical distancing from students. As the district's primary elementary learning model transitions to full in-person now, the remote learning program will be finalized once we receive the survey results from families to determine the numbers of children who are committed to either in-person or remote learning. Also, HPS grades 6 through 12 will remain in hybrid learning. The administration proposes that our hybrid learning model continue at the secondary level, but we will require the model to be reconsidered every month. Each principal of the Hingham Middle School and Hingham High School shall establish an advisory committee consisting of the respective school councils with the addition of a health sector professional to make recommendations to each principal for consideration of advancing in-person learning. Effective on or before March 17, 2021, students in grades 6 through 8 will attend school in person on Wednesdays in alternating cohorts, A and AD on the first and third Wednesday, and B and AD on the second and fourth Wednesday. We propose to expand the in-person learning for students in grades 6 through 12 with an emphasis on increasing class sizes while maintaining the 6-foot physical requirements. The synchronous learning model provides students with a strong, as the synchronous learning model we're using now, provides students with a strong, engaging program. Hingham exceeds the DESE requirements for structured learning time and engagement compared to other districts. This does provide us the time to determine the appropriate plan forward. So some supporting evidence. The Hingham community COVID-19 data had yellow zone for the past 3 weeks. We are among the lowest per capita transmission rate on the South Shore. The vast majority of our cases reported have originated from outside of the school setting. We've had very few instances where there were confirmed staff to student, or student-to-student transmission in the school setting. We have no confirmed student-staff cases. The district initiated free COVID-19 testing for all staff in January. 730 staff tests have been completed. Only one positive case reported. This represents a positive test rate of only 0.14%. The district has initiated pool testing for students with more than 800 families consenting within the first week. So supporting evidence of the elementary, Hingham Public Schools has 1,521 elementary students in K through 5 attending in person in a hybrid learning program. Of that 1,521, 134 students are fully remote. You can see the breakdown of grade 1 is 21, grade 2, 28, 3 is 30, 4 is 29, and grade 5 is 26. Only 4 student cases total in grades 3K through 5 since January 16, 2021. That's a weekly average of 1.33 cases. There are no staff to student, student to staff, or student to student in school transmission since the case at PRS in mid-December that was quickly resolved. At the secondary level, secondary age children do represent a higher percentage of overall COVID-19 cases. CDC, DPH, and the American Academy of Pediatrics continue to recommend maintaining 6-foot physical distancing for this age group. Since the pandemic began, the rate of positive cases at the secondary level are higher than elementary cases, which supports, go back please. Can you go back? There you go. Which supports the caution for maintaining 6-foot physical distancing at the secondary level. Elementary, with our cases that we've had, is 2.8% of our elementary students have tested positive. A little higher at the middle school at 3.6% of the in-person population. At high school, we have 8% of our student population tested positive for COVID-19. We are mitigating risk. State positivity rates are significantly down since December. The Hingham community responded and reduced the rates to yellow zone for the past 3 consecutive weeks, among the lowest per capita transmission rate on the South Shore. The district is one of the first on the South Shore to provide free COVID-19 testing for all staff. The district is one of the first on the South Shore to provide free pooled testing for students. We will advocate to the extent possible for more families to participate to enhance the safety of full in-person learning so that we can make this happen. Testing initiatives will aid the district in monitoring the prevalence of COVID-19 in our schools and community and act quickly if we need to. We also took many precautions with the additional PPE. We have air purifiers in our classrooms, we do daily CO2 checks in our classrooms, and we provide any and all PPE required by our staff. And we are balancing our risks, so nothing is without risk. We acknowledge the added risk that reducing from 6 feet to 3 to 6 feet Physical distancing might increase. I didn't say it would, I said it might increase the potential number of children and staff subject to quarantine, entire class quarantine, or even perhaps whole school quarantine, which we would have to pivot to remote learning in any of those circumstances. Reducing from 6 feet to 3'6", physical distancing might increase the risk of transmission in school. This will need to be monitored, although evidence has shown low risk when multiple mitigation factors are in place. High-risk individuals may reconsider their ability to continue in person due to the potential of increased risk of personal or family safety. This could exacerbate our staffing shortage, though we hope it will not. Providing unmasked lunches and increased mask breaks, all at 6 feet, might increase the transmission of COVID-19 in our schools. Cohasset has shown, for example, that no in-school transmission has held lunch, and they have held their lunches at 6-foot distancing all year. So that's been really good. It was an example of somebody asked, do we look at other data? Our next steps. For our proposals are subject to collective bargaining with the Hingham Education Association, and we are working with them. We met with them today. We will meet with them again over the break, actually. Proposals will be negotiated in good faith and are subject to ratification by both the membership of the HEA and the full membership of the Hingham School Committee. It is our intention to work collaboratively with administration, between administration and teachers to support our students. Tonight, I'm asking the school committee for feedback and request the school committee take a formal vote to accept the final proposal on February 22nd, 2021, so that we can meet our deadline of March 15th or earlier. We will advocate for greater commitment from both staff and families to voluntarily participate in our COVID-19 testing programs. This is an essential component directly related to the health and safety of all students and staff. Families will be surveyed to determine their commitment of either in-person or remote learning and, of course, their transportation needs. We continue to advocate for vaccinations for all staff. Some members of our staff have already been vaccinated with the first dose, but getting everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible is absolutely essential. The school committee will be voting on a resolution to support teacher vaccines later this evening. And I'll take questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Dr. Austin, for that presentation, and I think it's a great step forward and very good news. So what we're going to do tonight is, this is brand new for everyone on the call. This is the first most of the committee is seeing of it, and we're not prepared to take questions on it tonight. However, we do want to hear from people, so we're going to have a short discussion as a committee. I have 15 minutes set aside for any comments or questions from the audience, and then we will have a fuller discussion with more public comment on the 22nd when we vote on it. So that said, does anyone in the school committee have any questions or comments on this plan? If you do, if you could just unmute yourself.
Okay, it's Michelle. May I go?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Austin, for putting that together. I know your leadership team and staff has worked tirelessly to put it together, and as Carrie said, it is a positive step in progress. So thank you all for everyone who put probably the weekend into putting that together, as well as the past several months. So my just quick question is, any preliminary thoughts on transportation? Like, do we have some hurdles there we have to overcome, or is that, can we manage that? Just curious about that.
Yeah, we are. We actually started about a week or two ago and started asking our transportation director to put a plan together and be prepared for this to happen. So this has not been an overnight decision. This has been one of the work. So we need that information. We know that transportation could be an issue. We know that we're only limited to 23 people on a bus at the same time. We did go after the other 5 buses so we could make this happen. And so we took some really good precautions ahead of time, and we really prepared ourselves to get here today in a couple of different ways. So part of when we do survey, the parents will be asking for their, what they are, if they're going to need transportation, not particularly at the elementary level, so we can make sure that we meet all their needs. But we are working on a plan, and so we are aware that we have some hurdles to overcome, but I feel we're going to be able to do that. We feel confident we'll be able to.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the committee have any questions or comments? Jen and then Carlos. Jen, you're muted. Oh, Carlos, why don't you go first?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Dr. Austin, to you and your team, I want to thank you and really let you know how much you are appreciated by many. I know it's been hard. You didn't sign up for this part of the job. Things happen and happens for a reason, and from the bottom of my heart, I wanted to thank you. I would also respectfully ask that you, as part of your recommendation to us, that you try your best in actually, pushing this to happen earlier rather than on the 15th of March, if possible, the 1st of March. I know that, we're about 3 weeks from March 1st. So it's, time flies and it may not be possible, but if you could try that, that would be great. Secondly, I would respectfully ask that we do whatever we can to bring the middle school and high school students back a little more. Especially, I feel bad for the seniors. Seniors last year definitely did not, have a great year. With whatever we can do to mitigate, them return to in person, if it's not 5 days, perhaps 3 days. So kindly consider that. Thank you.
If you want me to respond to that,
sure.
Quickly, I think, one of the things, and Carlos, thank you for the comments. First of all, we have to put some staff in place. And we already began the process of starting to identify those people who need to do that. So we have several people we have to bring on and on board, and we're still looking for some more. So if anybody knows teachers that are looking for a position, certainly let us know. That's important, and so that does take us a little bit of time. And so we didn't want to create such a tight timeline that we wouldn't be able to meet the expectation. And so that's why the March 15th. But I would agree, if we can do that sooner, we will try to do that if at all possible on that first part. The second part is on the, you notice the proposal talked about bringing back certainly the middle school on Wednesdays, the alternating Wednesdays, but also I think, we need to maximize our space. We have a lot of space that's available in classrooms, and we have to rethink that, and that's part of the reason we've been asking our principals to reevaluate their spaces, how we can increase the number of children in there, because we need to get them full on a regular basis. There are classrooms that have just a very small number of children, even though it's tricky because the schedule is tricky. And so there's a lot to work through there, but I know that they'll be vigilant in that regard, and getting as many kids in there as we can. Also, I'm very confident that putting together these advisory committees with a health professional on there will put us in the right direction, that we get more input from the community on getting moving and forward. So I think it's a good place to start, but we're not done. We're not done for sure.
Great. No, thank you. Carrie, may I just, as a follow-up, to what M.G.L asked in terms of transportation, we do know that many parents did volunteer and offer themselves to even bring the students to the schools. So this is perhaps the time for us to think outside of the box, and if there is a way for us to put a survey out to see what parents would be available to help out, I'm sure that a lot of people would come forward and help bring students to the schools. Thank you.
Yeah, the survey we're going to put out will include not only are you going to be remote or in person, but can you transport or help with that. This is going to be a community lift. I'm excited for it. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's going to be a lift, and we're going to make it happen.
Great, thank you. Jen?
Thank you. Thank you for this plan. It's thoughtful and moving in the right direction. I just wanted to think about what Carla said about moving forward a little bit, pursuing a little bit earlier than March 15th, and I would just encourage you to continue to look at even the week of March 1st or even March 8th. March 8th would be 2 weeks after their vacation. Just wanted to mention that. And then I didn't hear anything about plans with students in the high school. I know that is something that you're looking through, and I didn't know if part of the plan is looking through the Wednesdays, alternating the Wednesdays for the high school. Is that something we're still considering looking
because it is space that we're really trying to figure out and maximizing it. And that's the things that I've asked them to do right now. And again, I don't want anybody to think that we're not going to produce anything more. That's what I have right now. And we wanted to focus on at least getting our K-5s in full time, which is huge. That's a big deal. And so we want to do that. We want to do it well. We want to get our middle schoolers in on the alternate Wednesdays. That's a plus. We want to fill up our classrooms, but now we got to make sure we have space and how we're using it moving forward. And getting some people involved in the process of giving us some input of possible other solutions. But I think this is a great start. But I don't want anybody to think that we're not going to continue working towards. Just like we've been working on these kind of things for weeks, and people don't necessarily see that. But we will continue to work on that as well, and continue to think about how we can improve the situation for high school students.
Great, thank you. Any other committee members have questions or comments? Liza?
So thank you, Dr. Austin and the administration. I also want to thank the community for the collective efforts to get us to yellow. It definitely helped us move us in the right direction. And also for participating in the pool testing. That definitely shows a commitment to wanting to help in monitoring ourselves and surveilling ourselves to get the rates down too. And I encourage others to participate because that will make being fully in person at 3 to 6 feet much more doable. This really shows we here, the school committee, the administration, we do believe in getting to 5 full days a week for elementary, and I'm glad we have this detail now in front of us. I also want to thank some members of the community that shared information about what other districts were doing because it gave us some research. I looked into plans of what they were doing, and I want to point out, for our remote students, that's something we have to finalize once we know who our remote students are. And I really hope we work something out. We keep our students with our Hingham teachers, and with our remote students, we really need to focus on those remote students per DESE regulations, that they have this option for health reasons. And I want to advocate that our expectation should be that the remote program is for these students, or if their family has a health reason. We really need to support the whole class and having the teacher and all the in-person students be able to plan accordingly and not have remote students popping in and out of class. We need to make the commitment. If you're a remote student, you're a remote student. That will help everyone as your specific learning preference. So I hope we can put that in the survey. We found in other towns that their remote students, they're working with Tech Academy, or if the district decided to go back in person, and a student didn't want to go in at 3 feet, their only option was to go to Tech Academy, which is an online school that the state is offering. So I'm glad that we can still keep our remote students here. I also saw, these other towns with special ed and their high needs students, they're returning them now, and we've had those students in from the beginning. So that was good news to see what we've done. Also, now we can actually make this move. We have the Foster North space figured out, and we freed up that space in Foster. Other districts had extra space around or extra whole buildings around to be able to move people around. And I did talk to some school committee members in other districts, and it was reassuring to hear they were looking at what success we had in our programs. And I asked them questions about how were they getting agreement from their community, from their unions, how are they figuring out their plans. And they were asking me how we did our synchronous learning and how we did our testing. And so we had
had some good exchanges that I shared with Dr. Austin to be able to inform us of this plan. So it was very helpful. And I think that covers it, but we've got, we still have some more work to do. And I agree, if we can move people in sooner than March 15th, let's do it. But I also want to make sure that we have the logistics in place and we're ready to go day one when we do bring students in. So we need to make sure that we're all set. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Nestor, Libby, do you have anything? No. I just want to say thank you again for doing that. To your point, Dr. Austin, this is a big deal to be able to get our youngest learners in. We said from the beginning we were going to prioritize those students, and you've done that. And we have to keep moving forward, though. I guess that's the one thing. I second everyone who says that we should move earlier than March 15th if possible. But at least we have a target date now, and I think that's really helpful for people. I guess my one question is on the secondary level. You said there will be task forces that meet once a month. Is that right, or did I mishear that?
Did I say once a month? I didn't say what the frequency was. I said that each one would be and that we would have, at least we would review at least monthly what our plan is. That's what I was saying about what our, how we were doing hybrid. That's what I meant. Okay.
No, thank you. That's helpful. I just think we should, if possible, we should push that forward as quickly as we can. Just times is of the essence. Somebody mentioned the seniors. This is their last experience at Hingham High School, and they need in-person learning too. And I know there are a ton of issues to work through with that, but and I know you are thinking about all these things and have been for since March. But I think if we can move the secondary level forward too, that would be really important. Okay, so I see a number of hands up. As I said, a couple of things. First, this plan, this is the first this committee is seeing of the plan, and it will be on the website by tomorrow for the public to review and to read through. We also need time with it too. So I'm just going to set aside 15 minutes for public comments. We're not going to discuss it or answer questions about it tonight, but we will have a full discussion on the 22nd. And we're always around through email. Dr. Austin's here for people who have questions once they have a chance to review the plan. So with that said, the first hand I see is Heather Von Smith.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
And Heather.
Hi, Heather Smith, 17 Free Street. And thank you, Dr. Austin. Thank you, school committee and staff. When you sit in a Zoom meeting, you sit usually by yourself. And so I'm watching your PowerPoint, and you're telling me about mitigating the risk and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, are you guys hearing us? Because we don't feel there's a risk. I am willing to bet everybody on this phone call could tell you they are not concerned about the risk. They are concerned about getting their children back into the schools. So that said, I realize you can't answer questions. I would make the comment that a 3-1 move update for the 5th grade, K through 5, would be something to shoot for. And I would really, really push for the secondary grades. I received I'm assuming Rick Swanson is on this as well. And he sent an email saying that there was 81 cases in the high school since the beginning of COVID, if I understood it correctly. And from those 81 cases, none were, staff to students, students to staff, in-school transmissions. So if that's it, and if that is true, then I've got to assume, again, I'm going to go back to the union, or I'm going to go back to spacing issues at the high school. And I would absolutely volunteer to get on a committee to talk to you about spacing issues in the high school. So that would be one. The second piece next to it, just on the budgets, I'm assuming there was money given to the public schools on the CARE Act. I didn't see it. I may have missed it in the presentation. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Next, we have Julie Donovan.
Thanks, Gary. Dr. Austin, I have to share, like, very heartfelt and super transparently that I think this plan is shocking, insulting, and super disappointing that you're not bringing the upper grade students back in. You are leaving those students behind. And these students have been out of school for a year. They're missing the social and emotional part of being a student just as much as, quite frankly, they are missing their education. So I am begging you to please include a plan. Right now, we don't need a perfect plan, Dr. Austin. We need a plan. And it's okay if there are holes and we have to work through it even on the fly. These are older students, they're a little more flexible. We owe it to these older students, the middle schoolers and the high schoolers, to bring them back. They cannot sit in their rooms by themselves anymore on Zoom calls. What they're learning, you can't learn pre-calculus and AP chemistry on a Zoom call. You need to be with your peers and your teachers learning in a class together. So I'm, again, begging, and I will say praying, that you will please consider a plan that includes the upper grades. We are leaving them behind. I'm so upset. I'm so disappointed that I'm a little bit speechless. And so I am asking, and school committee members who brought this up, thank you so much for bringing this up. So I want to leave that with you. And last point on this. This is a crisis. This is a sprint. Every day, every hour that goes by is a missed opportunity. So just in a leisurely pace to say we're going to get back together in 2 weeks is not acceptable. We should be meeting tomorrow and getting these high school students, getting the entire human population back. Please, please, Dr. Austin, do not leave these students behind.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Next, Lauren Byrne.
Thanks. Just a quick comment. If you guys had started with that, you probably would have saved yourselves an hour of the meeting with questions and anxious parents, but great news for the K through 5. Just a quick question for you, Dr. Austin, and hopefully you can just answer this quickly, or someone clarify. Carrie, you mentioned the meeting on the 22nd. So Dr. Austin or school committee, could you just disclose to us the schedule for the Hea negotiations, when you guys meet again, and then when we can expect to get the next update? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Liza, do you want to speak to that negotiation schedule?
We met with them today, and we shared this with them, so we got some initial feedback, and then we are meeting with them Tuesday, February 16th. We are giving up our vacation time for all of you. And then we're meeting with them, and we have another meeting scheduled the following week. But we can take a vote without the final. But we're still working with them on all the details.
Yeah, I would just add that it's the school committee's role with the superintendent to decide when to move to phase 3. Next, Susie O'Hara.
Hi, Susie O'Hara, 7 Wander Star of Hingham. I have 2 questions. One is, you mentioned, Dr. Austin, that they're going to be, you're going to need some health professionals on the advisory boards or whatever at the upper levels. Is there a way that we can find out how to get involved with that?
Yeah, we'll post how we're going to do that. We haven't talked with that through yet, so I'll post that. Yep.
Okay. And the second thing I have to say is just, I'm so happy for the 1st through 5th graders, but I'm just so immeasurably sad for our upper level kids. And I really echo Julie Donovan's comments and the other people here that, the pace with which we've approach this whole thing is really a snail's pace. And, I think speed and time is of the essence at this point. The CDC is coming up with new criteria on Wednesday, and I'd like a commitment on the part of everyone that if, they do recommend 3 feet, that we, commit to going to that standard as well. I mean, I can understand that they still recommend 6 feet. I think the science does not support that personally. And that education is essential, and the risks of the kids being in school is far outweighed by the risks of them not being in school. And that we should be doing everything to get them back, so that if the CDC does change their recommendations on Wednesday, that we are able to pivot just as quickly. And then just another fact, even though there have been 150 cases in the schools since the start of school, I think that what you had said is it's a rate, and actually no, it's actually a prevalence, because you're saying that there's 150 cases over 4,300 kids. That's actually a prevalence. So when you consider the fact that there's been 140 cases over 4,300 students over 6 months, I mean, that's actually a really low rate in the schools. So I don't feel like that's a justifiable reason to keep these kids out of school. So I really, again, would echo Julie, Donovan, and all the other speakers' commitment. There's sentiments to get these kids back in school sooner rather than later.
Dr. Howard, I know it, and you just mentioned it. I know that we're expecting as early as Wednesday the new guidelines from the CDC, and I'll wait just like you to see what those are. And you're right, because the current guidelines by the DPH, by CDC, and even the American Academy of Pediatrics is all still saying 6 feet. And so that's a big challenge. And so I look forward to those guidelines as well, and increase. And I understand the prevalence that you just, I agree with you.
Great, thank you. Next it says Fly Girl.
Yes. Hello. 12 Highfield Road. And I'd like to thank each of you for all your hard work, and especially working through the vacation on our behalf. I'd like to say it's on all of our students and all of our town members' behalf. But I embrace the fact, Dr. Austin, that you and your committee have spent many, many months trying to incorporate the students' life back into the system, and now we're executing the K through 5. And I am perplexed as to the pivot for the middle and secondary and high school to have the principal of each school and an advisory committee evaluate the opportunity for more live opportunities for the students. And that I believe you had said you'd address, but a hybrid evaluation, I'll say at least every 30 days. I don't know if it was accurate when you did say once every 30 days, but realistically that only gives 2 opportunities to return our middle, I'll speak for high school students, back to a more interactive learning experience, and it's a detriment to their mental health. And it's a great concern, and I feel that we've been told as parents, follow the science, look at the facts. At this opportunity, we are looking at the facts. We are following the science. It's been quoted by many amazing, intelligent people that attend these meetings, either by written language or them giving their viewpoint. The specialist that discussed the 3 research opportunities in the previous part of the meeting. So parents are trying to look more toward the facts of science versus the emotional aspect, although certainly we have that for our children. And it appears to me that when you do go to the meetings and discuss it with the teachers' unions, it appears that that is the side that's becoming very emotional in their decisions that they're making. And so I, like Carlos and every other parent that has spoken on here, I do deplore you to try and operate in a rapid pace. And you and your committee have done a great job for the past months to run through these scenarios. And so to only have really 2 opportunities to make the changes for the high school at this juncture seems pretty impractical for return.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Eileen Bevins.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think that the words were very strong and maybe stronger than I've heard from that type of presentation in the past, so I appreciate it. I understand the plan to get the younger kids in first, and I know that it's really hard for them to be online, but I do want to just say that the kids in high school have less time to catch up on things that they've missed, and I just don't want that to be overlooked. They're going to be competing with students from other states for college spots who have been in school in person this whole time, so I just don't want to lose sight of that. But my second point is that I want to reiterate my concern about a staffing plan. I've heard that, we do need more teachers, and I appreciate that you're asking people to come forward if they know anyone, but I want to understand if there is a plan. There does seem to be a plan for the buses and a lot of other things that are required, but I have not seen a plan for how we are going to get teachers in that are needed to fulfill the to bring kids back. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just answer that quickly. Yes, there is a plan. The HR director is working on that now. We've been advertising already, and we will continue to do so. So there is a plan.
Okay, thank you very much. That said, it's been 15 minutes, so we're going to move on. Again, I see there are a bunch of other hands up, and we will have a fuller discussion about this on the 22nd, and we're also all available until then if you have questions as things come up. And the plan will be on, the presentation will be up on the website for you to review too, if you have any questions about that. Okay, so we're on to 7, unfinished business. 7.1 is to review proposed section I of the Hingham Public Schools Policy Manual and act as appropriate. A third read. We're actually going to table this tonight. The policy subcommittee met last week, and we have a little more work to do on a couple of the policies. So we will bring that to the 22nd meeting as well.
Carrie?
Yeah?
Just want to remind you that we did skip number 2, approval of the minutes, if you want to do that.
I'm going to do that at the end.
Sure, thanks.
7.2 is to receive an update on the Hea negotiation process, and Liza is going to help us with that.
Right, thank you, Carrie. We've received a lot of questions about our negotiations process, so I just wanted to give a little overview and share with some people with some progress we've made this year. We've had a lot of negotiations going on. So the school committee is the contractual party in all union agreements because of our authority for the school budget. The school committee has a subcommittee to conduct the work for the negotiations with unions, individual contracted personnel, and other salary-related issues such as hourly rates. The subcommittee provides recommendations to the full school committee for a final vote and decision. The school committee and subcommittee follows the labor laws, which require both sides to bargain in good faith, and once agreement is reached, to adhere to the contracts and the agreements. If either side is in violation, there are legal remedies such as filing of labor violations, grievances, and lawsuits. It is considered an unfair labor practice to refuse to bargain collectively with the representatives of the employees. So we are following and focused on being good citizens and following those laws. In addition, the school committee also follows the Massachusetts open meeting laws, which do allow for negotiations to be conducted in executive session to protect our bargaining positions. All of the sessions have a posted public agenda outlining the purpose of the session, and we do open the sessions in public session to verbally state the purpose. Negotiations with unions and personnel agreements are 2 of the 10 specific purposes for which an executive session may be held, including purpose number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. And number 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. Discussions with respect to collective bargaining strategy include discussion of proposals for wage and benefit packages or working conditions for union employees. Per the open meeting law, the school committee may agree on terms with individual non-union personnel in executive session. The final vote to execute such agreements with individual non-union personnel must be taken by the public body in open session. Also, per the open meeting law, in contrast, the school committee may approve final terms and execute a collective bargaining agreement in executive session, but should promptly disclose the agreement in open session following its execution. Our practice is to have our discussion for both types of agreements in executive session and then vote in public session. The school committee does work with the superintendent and our labor attorney to strategize and participate in negotiations with 6 unions. The unions also include a committee of their members and their union advisor for the negotiations. The 6 units are the 6 units include, there's 3 HEA units. Unit A are the teachers, nurses, and guidance counselors. Unit B are the paraprofessionals, and Unit C are the custodians and maintenance workers. We also have union agreements with food service workers, bus drivers, and the Administrators Association. The school committee maintains collective bargaining agreements with each union that cover 3-year terms for overall during normal operations. The process for negotiating those agreements include strategy planning sessions with the administration and the school committee together, then negotiating sessions with the unions, planning and research time reviewing benchmark towns and other districts, recording of meeting minutes, and finalizing memorandums of agreements and contracts. For the HEA Unit A, we most recently negotiated an update to their 3-year agreement. The process began in October of 2019 and concluded at the end of May 2020, so we were negotiating throughout the spring shutdown. And that agreement is in place covering the 2020 to 2023 school years. HEA Unit B, Paraprofessionals, we renegotiated their 2020 to 2023 agreement with them in this past June and July. HEA Unit C, the custodian and maintenance workers, we're currently negotiating their 2020 to 2023 agreement. We began with them in December and have our next session scheduled with them for this Thursday, February 11th. For the food service workers, their 3-year agreement was for 2017 to 2020, and we mutually agreed to a 1-year rollover agreement for 2021, just because of everything going on in the world, and with the plan to renegotiate a new 3-year agreement with them for 21 to 24. And the bus drivers, we are meeting with them for the first time for their 2020 to 2023 agreement on Wednesday, February 10th. The Administrators Association is also not part of the HEA, and we are in the process of negotiating a new 3-year agreement with them. We began negotiations in the beginning of January and have another session with them tomorrow, Tuesday, February 9th, and another one scheduled later in the month if needed. Just as note, the school committee does pay retroactive pay to any of the union workers if their contract is settled later in the year. In addition, there can be additional agreements with the unions for impact bargaining that the school committee also participates in, such as the Memorandum of Agreements for reopening school during the COVID pandemic. These agreements are necessary because certain working conditions have changed from the collective bargaining agreements, such as schedules, professional development, building conditions, and hours of operations. For HEA Unit A, the teachers, we concluded 2 memorandum of agreements in the spring of 2020, a memorandum of agreement for the start of school in fall of 2020. We updated that memorandum of agreement as of December 20th, and we are in the process of updating that again now. So we met with them currently, or most recently, January 11th, January 25th, today, and then we have a meeting scheduled, as I said, next week during vacation, and another one after that. We are not at an impasse with them. We are working collaboratively with them to finalize all the details of returning to school. And then HEA Unit B, we did do a memorandum of agreement for the 2020-2021 school year with the paraprofessionals that we worked on in October and November of 2020. And Unit C, we are negotiating some COVID-related issues concurrently with the collective bargaining agreement terms. So, in summary, our work with the unions has been extremely busy this year with negotiations for normal school operating collective bargaining agreements and COVID-related agreements. This week alone, we have sessions with 4 unions on 4 separate days. All of the meetings are posted with the Town of Hingham, with agendas under the open meeting law regulations.
Thank you very much, Lila. Okay, item 8.1 is to receive a draft of the proposed secondary program of studies for the 2021-2022 school year. Dr. Austin?
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Mr. Swanson and Dr. Lebilwa to present that.
Actually, Dr. Austin deferred to Principal Swanson and Principal Smith.
There you go, okay.
Okay, sure. I think this will be very brief. We sent a memo over last week to school committee members with current or the proposed new program of studies for the next school year. It is probably 99% the same as last year's program of studies. The booklet, of course, contains course descriptions for all of our courses, an overview of graduation requirements, and an explanation of the course selection process. And we anticipate that the process will move forward in a very traditional manner, and with the expectation that we'll be heading into a school year next year that looks much more typical, and we hope for a return to our traditional schedule. And the only changes really to the booklet at all were 2 relatively minor changes. One was an adjustment to some secondary literacy courses, and the other an addition of a social studies elective. So we're happy to address any questions, or potentially also if you have questions about the adjustments to those 2 courses. I know we're joined tonight by our English and social studies directors as well, who had proposed those.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions? I'm not seeing any. Anyone in the public have any questions? You can raise your hand. So what's the program of studies? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I guess the one question I have is, where can parents find it if they want to review the program of studies?
The current program of studies is posted on the school website, and we'll very soon be posting the brand new one onto the website as well, and soon with an explanation for the course selection process. And when we come back from February vacation, right after the vacation, we'll be releasing basically a recorded version of what typically would be an in-person event at the high school, the program of studies night, where typically parents would have an opportunity to hear a presentation about the program of studies, and then also meet with some of the department directors and coordinators to ask questions individually. We're preparing a pre-recorded video version of that we'll release right after the break.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
If you go on the Hingham High School page and then click under resources, the program of studies is listed under the column titled For Students.
Great. Okay, I'm seeing Laura Achatella has her hand up. Oh, sorry, we have to unmute you.
Sorry about that. Laura Achatella for Boulder Glen Road. I just had a quick question about the adjustments to the secondary literacy program. What grades, please?
So those, yeah, go ahead, Mary Andrews, if you'd like to take that one.
Sure, I was just happy to explain that we have currently in place a core literacy strategies course and a secondary literacy strategies course. Secondary literacy strategies have been traditionally and will continue to be for freshmen who need tier 2 supports, and for core literacy strategies for our sophomores, and there's a little bit more targeted toward MCAS prep in that course. It is a general education course, but there are obviously children also in 504s and IEPs also in that course. So our thinking behind changing them to semester courses, which we ended up doing this year just because we had to make some significant changes to the schedule because of COVID, is that one of the hurdles that we faced was students being either sometimes unwilling and sometimes unable to take the course because it was a later course. So we are moving toward a semester, so that for two reasons. A, would offer students who are looking for other electives that are might be more in interest and alignment with their hobbies and interests as opposed to just literacy support. But it also allows those students who need a more targeted, tailored approach of having directed study in their program and in their academic schedule to have that for at least half the year. So that is our reasoning behind the change.
Great, thank you. If I could just ask one follow-up, just assurances that this does include level 2 classes at the 7th and 8th grade. I know that was in last year's program of studies, but that wasn't able to continue. So I just was looking for some assurance that that will happen next year.
I'd be happy to speak to that. Thank you very much. As was always the plan and stated back when we had to make the shift to unleveled classes due to the pandemic, we fully intend to reinstate leveled instruction in grade 7 and 8 next year. And our teachers are actively working on the recommendation process and will be rolling out guidelines for parents and students so that they know what to expect in the coming weeks at the middle school. Thanks very much for asking the question. I know it's something that's been on a lot of people's minds, and we do have a communication prepared to go out after the February break for parents so that they are better informed as to what to expect in the coming weeks. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Next is 8.2 to receive the first draft of the proposed 2021-2022 school calendar and act as appropriate. Dr. Aspen?
Yes, thank you very much. And in your packets tonight, you receive a copy of the proposed draft calendar a little bit earlier this year than we've done in past years. We've heard lots of people want to get it out early. And the policy committee actually looked at that as well because it is under policy ICA, I believe, on the new standards. And so, yeah, so you have the draft and take any question you might have.
Are there any questions from the committee? No? Okay, not seeing any. I think what I would just say is that Rosh Hashanah falls on what would normally be the first day of school this coming year. So we did discuss that and decided that we didn't want students to have to make that choice. So we are recommending that this year we consider that a vacation day, similar to Good Friday, which we have off, so that students don't have to make that choice. So school would be starting on the Wednesday after Labor Day this year instead of the Tuesday. And that's
it's Wednesday the 8th, right? I think it's Wednesday the 8th.
It's a little small in my packet. Yep. So just if anyone has any questions about that too, that was our thinking. Okay, with that, I would take a motion to approve the calendar.
I move that we approve the calendar, the proposed calendar for fiscal year 21-22.
Do we have a second? Second. Thanks, Miss. Okay, roll call vote. Michelle?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Ness? Aye. Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Liza?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So the calendar is adopted. Next is to consider a resolution in support of expedited COVID-19 vaccinations for educators and act as appropriate. Libby is going to ask you this one.
Okay, so this resolution is to encourage state legislators to prioritize public school personnel for access to the COVID-19 vaccine. And the language was shared with us by the Hadley School Committee that voted on it on February 1st. And I'm just going to summarize it now as briefly as I could. And so I'm just going to read my summary and we'll discuss it then. Whereas a proper functional public education system is essential to the proper functioning of our communities and economy, whereas public schools are facing unprecedented challenges and lack clear national and state direction or resources, whereas vaccines are proven to be the most effective strategy to reduce the spread of infectious diseases, whereas a priority distribution plan must give priority to the most vulnerable, including essential workers, which includes educators, whereas not increasing in-person learning compromises long-term educational outcomes, the social-emotional health of our students, and the livelihood of many families, where prioritization of public school personnel will remove a significant challenge to more in-person learning. Therefore, let it be resolved that the Hingham School Committee calls on the state legislature, the governor, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health to include all school personnel as a top priority for access to the COVID-19 vaccine. Be it further resolved that the Hingham School Committee calls on the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to publicly advocate for the same.
Thank you, Libby. Does anyone in the committee have any questions about that or comments?
Thank you, Libby, for bringing it forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think. Carlos?
Yeah, just would add, because the resolve does cover all school personnel, but right after educators, I would add, and our school personnel. So that way, this is actually covering every single staff at the schools, from the custodians all the way up to the superintendent. So if you can include that, that would be great, Libby, right after educators and all school personnel.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be good. Okay, so I will take a motion. Libby, do you want to make a motion?
So I'll make a motion for the Hingham School Committee to pass the resolution to encourage the state legislature to prioritize school personnel for access to the COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. Roll call, Michelle.
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Ness?
Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Resolution passes. 8.4 is to consider the homeschool applications for the following students for school year 2020-2021 and to act as appropriate. We have a kindergarten student, a second grade student, another second grade student, a fifth grade student, and a further second grade student. Dr. Austin?
Yeah, just in your package tonight, we received the copies that you needed to consider this tonight. We have reviewed all the applications, and they do meet the expectations that we have for homeschool applications, and so I recommend approval.
Okay. Take a motion to approve the homeschool applications.
I make a motion that we approve the homeschool applications of JS grade K, IS grade 2, JA grade 5, and DL grade 2 as recommended by the superintendent.
Thank you, Carlos. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you, Nancy. Roll call, Michelle Ayer. Aye. Jen Bennett. Aye. Jess Parenti. Aye. Carlos Silva.
Aye.
Libby Lewicki.
Aye.
Liza O'Reilly.
Aye.
And Julie as well. Okay, so those are approved. Number 9 is subcommittee and project reports. We'll just go through alphabetically, Michelle.
I don't have anything.
Jen. Okay, Ness.
I have a couple things. First is the finance subcommittee. You'll see in your packet I put in 2 updates from reports that I previously gave on our December 8th and our January 19th finance subcommittee meetings. There's also a draft update from our last session, which was on February 2nd. That's also included in there, and I want to stress that that's draft. The item that's in draft is Appendix A, or Attachment A, which documents some of the revolving funds, where those sources of funds come from, how the funds are used, and what the recommended balance should be. This is something that the committee will need to discuss at a future meeting. So John Ferris and I are in the process of doing that. We've got many of the balances included in there, but there's some additional ones that we want to include. We also discussed the plan usage of some revolve accounts that are currently there, and we had talked to John and Dr. Austin about this. Under the building rental, the plan is to use $50,000 of the building revolving account to help fund the lease that we entered into for traces, and that would help defray some of the costs there. Another plan is to use $65,000 for pump house and maintenance under the grounds revolving account. And athletics, we're going to use $20,000 from the athletics revolving account. We don't have as much in gate receipts this year, so trying to help defray the cost of the total athletics, we thought we would use $20,000 of the athletics this year. In addition to that, there's 2 warrants in your packet that were signed, and that's all I had from the finance subcommittee. But I did have 2 other notes. HEF met on February 3rd. They discussed the results of the fall grant cycle. There were 16 grants that were approved, and they started discussing the next round of grants. The Equity Task Force met as well. They started discussing dates for Courageous Conversations, and Dr. Jamie and Dr. Vinnis held their first Courageous Conversations at the monthly METGO. The parents of the students in the METGO program, and M.G.L attended that as well to help while I was doing HEF. And that's all I had.
Thank you.
Mary, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Thank you for those finance committee reports. They're very detailed. I really appreciate it. So under attachment A, when it itemized each revolving account, could the finance subcommittee think about the fees associated with each account? Because, a lot of those it's fees we charge parents, and if we have increasing costs, maybe you guys could think about, is there a formula or is there a standardization for us to how we increase fees and tuitions? I know I raised the issue about the athletic fee. It's been many years since we've raised that. We've raised full day kindergarten and other tuitions, kids in action on a regular basis. But maybe put some uniformity into that while you're thinking about those other things.
That was, I think we had that on one of our goals, our long-term goals, given everything with COVID this year, but we haven't lost sight of it. I know John Garrison pulled together that package for us during the workshop last year, so I plan to revisit it.
Yep. Great, thank you. Thank you. Carlos, do you have anything?
SNAP will be meeting tomorrow. As the school committee liaison to the legislatures, I would like to respectfully ask parents at home to help us by calling our legislatures. Call John Mesquino, State Representative John Mesquino, State Representative Jimmy Murphy, and State Senator Patrick O'Connor, and ask that they also support this resolution that we just passed tonight, that we push the governor to prioritize our educators, our school personnel, right? Because the sooner that everyone is vaccinated here, that's, perhaps we can even go back to full in person. The other thing too is the governor does have the power to bring us back in person. But obviously, is without this, consideration of, safety consideration, that will be happening. So if you can put a little pressure on the governor, I know that President Biden Wednesday is going to be speaking on this too. So let's hope that they start putting with the money where the idea is, because just to say we believe in bringing everyone back is not good enough. We need the money. So let's utilize this resolution tonight to put some pressure on our politicians. Thank you. That's pretty much it for me.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Libby, do you have anything?
Just the community outreach subcommittee meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Libby. Liza?
Well, you heard all my negotiation stuff. And middle school council will be February 22nd. The master plan committee is meeting, hopefully one last time, February 24th to wrap up some things. And then now the planning board meeting to review the master plan is March 8th. So, yeah, that keeps getting pushed back. But hopefully we'll have that soon.
Thank you very much. All I have is policy. We'll be meeting before our next school committee meeting to finish up section I and hopefully finish up the new policy manual. We need to circle back. I apologize. I skipped the minutes earlier. So we could just do this quickly and do the approval of the minutes of the school committee meeting held on January 20th, 2021 with the capital outlay committee. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on January 20, 2021, jointly with the full school committee before the capital outlay committee.
Thank you. Do we have a second? That's it. Thanks, Jen. Any discussion? Okay. Michelle? Aye. Jen?
Aye.
Ness? Aye. Carlos?
Aye.
Libby? Libby, you're muted.
Yep, sorry, aye.
Liza? Aye. And I'm an aye as well. Next is the approval of the minutes of the school committee meeting held on January 20th, 2021 with the ACES subcommittee.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Michelle?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Nets? Aye. Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Liza? Aye. And I'm an aye as well. Third is the minutes of the school committee meeting held on January 25th, 2021, the regular school committee meeting.
January 25th.
Oh, I'm so sorry. January 25th, 2021.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Michelle? Aye. Jen?
Aye.
Ness? Aye. Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
minutes are approved. The minutes of the meeting on January 28th, we're going to postpone and pass on the 22nd school committee meeting. There was some editing that had to be done, and we couldn't get in the packet with enough time for the committee to review. So with all of that being said, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purposes of approving minutes of the executive session held on January 25th, 2021, and discussing strategy related to collective bargaining negotiations with HEA units A, B, C, D, and AA, the public discussion of which may be detrimental to the committee's bargaining position.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we'll do roll call vote. Michelle?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Ness?
Aye.
Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Isaac?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.